Hello, everybody, and welcome to Good Morning, Good Night, Episode 2. My name's Matt Demers. I'm here with Will Chobra. We are, we've survived our first episode. I think that's, in most in most projects, that's the thing, is that you need to come back for Episode 2. Because how many projects, Will, have you started that have just ended at, like, that first big, like, push?
Oh, God, I feel attacked. You know what's funny is... I actually have the kind of opposite, not opposite, but a different tendency where I guess I go too perfectionist in the planning phase. So actually most of my projects just like never start.
Yeah, it never starts.
Because I'm like, could I really do a second time around? I'm like, not yet. And then I just don't start it.
I definitely know that feeling. And I think I think I've told you this before, where streaming and this kind of job, or not job, but like making content is the easiest job to just buy more gadgets at. Like, you just buy gadgets.
Oh, yeah.
You just buy things that you think you need to make your stream or your quality or your podcast like amazing. And you're like, okay, I'm going to buy this thing. I'm going to buy this gadget. I'm going to buy this new microphone or camera or whatever. And then that'll be the thing that makes my stuff awesome. It'll make me want to do my product. And then you just never touch it because, so especially with last week, we just kind of wanted to get something out there. And then, like, I think a couple days after that, once we had got everything kind of on all the platforms and stuff like that, I just messaged Will and was like, oh, this is going all right. You want to do another one? And then and here we are.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much for all the good replies and feedback for our old podcast, our first episode of our podcast. Everything's up on different platforms and stuff. Libsyn, our host, is like awesome at just making that stuff easy. So we're up on like Spotify and iTunes and Google Play and all that other stuff. So I kind of just hunkered down and did all that stuff last week. So if you're listening to us still on Twitch live when we're streaming and doing our platform, or our live broadcast, thank you. But now we're on all these other like cool platforms that you can check us out during the week. And then also gmncast.com has links to all that stuff and also has the RSS link, so you can use whatever open source or whatever podcasting app to follow our stuff. So that's cool. How are you today, Will?
I've been good. Today actually I had to amidst obviously everything going on with the virus, I've been having to go to the embassy here in Korea to like take care of some paperwork, but then I decided against it because there's potential dangers for like another outbreak in Korea, so I had to like wait for a courier to come pick it up, but they were like, we might come Tuesday, we might come Wednesday, and I was like, okay. But it's like
that really narrows it down to 48-hour window.
Yeah, and like when they said that, I was like, hey, should we just schedule for Wednesday? And they're like, well, will you be ready Tuesday? And I was like, well, I'll be ready Tuesday. But
I got nothing to do. I'm just going to chill here.
And they were like, no, we'll schedule it for Tuesday. So that was weighing on me a bit just because, I just like needed to get it out there. But we got that out there. Obviously, for those who hang out on my stream, I've been enjoying Warzone, Call of Duty Warzone quite a bit. We've been having fun with that. Do you remember Ultimate Bravery, Matt?
Yes, sir. I do.
And other MOBAs.
Yes, sir, I do.
Yeah. So I've been having fun with that on COD.
For people who don't know, what was Ultimate Bravery in the League context?
So in League, I guess that's like the easiest way to explain it in today's day and age. Ultimate Bravery there was like this website with Ultimate Bravery, and it would randomize a build for you, right? And you had to basically win a match with that build. Although there were like some variations, right? Where I think originally maybe you had to get like the GA and whatever. There were like 3 items you had to get.
It was like a bingo, essentially. It was like bingo.
Yeah, there was like a bingo you had to get.
Yeah.
And then later it transitioned into like random build generator, basically.
Yeah.
And do silly things.
I think about that in Dota. And it's like one of the things that I always tell people with the differences between League and Dota is that items are a lot more impactful. So I think that because in League, your abilities scale off of the stats you get from items. So if you're a hero that does attack damage, if you have an item that has attack damage stat, your stuff gets stronger. But in Dota, all the scaling is very static, except for like a small amount of like I think intelligence to mana. Like there's a small amount of scaling, but it isn't as big a deal as League, where ratios can completely like break a character. I almost said hero and I tried to like self-correct to champion, and then I went character. But yeah, that's funny, and like it's funny how like little gimmicks emerged like that, especially with I haven't played Warzone, but I've heard that from a lot of people it's just a race to get to like $8,000 so you can get your actual loadout.
Yeah. So it's I think it's 6K, so it's actually pretty cheap. So currently, like the way to play it is it's really essentially just a BR with like your own class, right?
Yeah.
It's
which
it's a battle
takes
royale
out like
with just
half
your
the
own
fun of
class.
a BR, which is looting.
Personally, I'm with you. I think some people, like if they just want to try to win, like I get it, right? You just kind of want to get rid of the RNG and you just want to be on a map where last one standing wins, King of the Hill style. That's cool. I'm sure they'll tweak it a little bit, just because even a lot of the big players or streamers have been talking about it a little bit. Just some tweaks, right? Not getting rid of it. I think we all agree that it's cool. But just some tweaks. But yeah, otherwise it's been fun. I mean, so like you said, for me it's been, I've always kind of liked the novelty and RNG factor of Battle Royale. So bringing up these other gimmicks to kind of make it interesting and shake it up a little bit has been fun. But that's been pretty much it for me. I mean, obviously Warzone's kind of taken over the gaming world by storm recently. And so I've been on that train for a little bit. We'll see how it goes. But how about you, man? How have you been?
Not much. Like Canada, I think Canada's starting to go on lockdown, which is people are starting to either panic buy, or people are starting to like go into the weird thing of like, you brush off something like this, and the people that are only really paying attention are the people that are like already paying attention to the news cycle, or they're like already too online, if that makes sense. Like you can't avoid it if you're on Twitter or like following people that have that kind of natural like national reach, and then your grandma finds out about it, and then your mom or like people that like normally don't pay attention, like they might watch the evening news or something like that, and like those people might like that usually has a very fair and and measured response, hopefully. And then something happens, or at least something like escalates to a point where like, oh, now like the preppers are starting to like panic buy, or like people who haven't prepared at all, or people who don't have a lot of stuff are starting to panic buy. So like we're seeing like a lot of people, that's almost like the novelty of it. It's not like there's anarchy in the streets, and there's not like there's people like, killing people or anything like that. It's more of just like, yeah, I know. And that's a little bit of an extreme response, but I obviously, but at the same time, it's to the point where like normal people are noticing now, and normal people are like kind of panicking a little bit, and our government's like, okay, here's what we're shutting down. Don't if you're right. The one thing that I read yesterday was like the prime minister just basically being like, if you're abroad, now is the time to come home, because we're shutting travel down into the country except for the States. So it's a bit of an interesting thing. Like one of the things with Canada is that we're generally very synergistic with the States. Maybe not synergistic, maybe parasitic. I don't know. Like we kind of get affected by everything that happens in the U.S. and we kind of take a lot of cues from everything that happens in the U.S. So if something happens in the States, it usually affects us here. And so we're kind of feeling a lot of the stuff from the travel ban there, and like people I'm on the personal finance Canada Reddit, and like there's a lot of people panicking about housing and stuff there, and jobs and whatever. And I'm all like kind of tying into what we wanted to talk about this week. So many people are working from home that haven't been before, and so many people are dealing with self-isolation that they don't usually deal with that, or they don't usually like have to think about spending a lot of time at home. So we wanted to talk about that. We wanted to kind of go into our experiences with working remotely, or at least working in like this weird like self-isolation environment. And it's one of those things that I thought about it, and I'm like, my existence doesn't really change that much, because like I've worked from home for the past like 4 years at this point, and I don't really have anything that changes except for when I need to venture out into the normal world in order to get like groceries and that kind of shit, and when I like leave the house,
I love that you say like venture out.
Right? I put on regular clothes and I venture out into the normal world. I take off my pajamas.
There you go.
Or when I like go to like volleyball and stuff like that. Like I'm a big volleyball fan for the last like 2 or 3 years now, because that's been my get out of the house, at least once or twice a week, because I go through the city. My city has pretty good, like with volleyball, you can't just go to a park and play pickup volleyball because like you can with basketball, because you need a net and that kind of shit. So for me, it's like you pay $5, you get like 2 hours, 2.5 hours through the city.
Okay.
And that's great. That's for, it's like 18 plus, so you don't have to deal with like kids and like, you have a lot of people that either played in high school or played in college, and they're looking for a place to still play when they go to like university or they go to the workplace or whatever. So you've got like a really good stock of people that know how to play, and that's always good, because you hate feeling like the best person on the court. So that's all shut down now. So that's all shut down now, and my mom is even like, oh, I went to like a Walmart and I went to like a grocery store. I was blanking because I was gonna just say like the generic like name brand for the store, and I'm like, no one's gonna know that. They're going to like a generic supermarket, and they're like, oh yeah, the shelves are all gone. Like the shelves are like cleared because people are like just panic buying everything. And for me, I haven't done groceries in a while, and I'm sitting there with an empty fridge, and I'm like, oh God, this system worked fine for me, and now it's all in disarray because everyone's kind of like doing the same thing. And maybe that's what a lot of people are feeling right now, is like, oh, the system that I had was barely working for me, or like was just a perfect that if anything shifted about it in terms of how other people interacted with me or how I interacted with the system, everything is going to shit. And maybe that's like we had a conversation on Twitter about esports' like job stability, and maybe that's something we'll go into, but like it's a similar thing where I'm seeing a lot of people who had a system for making money or had a system for their job, and like one thing going wrong, for sustenance, or just like their lives. And now that we're looking at, I want to say 2 weeks, maybe a month. I'm saying this is probably like the worst of it in Canada, where everyone's still like freaking out because they don't know too much about it. And I don't know how long this like general, like, it's not like we have a curfew. Like I saw a rumor saying that they were going to put like a 10 p.m. curfew out. And I was like, oh, how long does that go on for? How long does that like happen? And I'm thinking, okay, maybe like 2 weeks, a month kind of thing. But it's like, we're in the worst of it right now, where it's just all new and people don't know how to interface it like with it. And people are like all trying to figure out how much it affects them. And I was talking with a friend of mine, Emily Chow.
Emily,
yeah, Emily's great. We both know Emily, and we were saying, I was like, this all feels very weird in the sense that like it's very global, and it's very like everyone has an opinion on it, and everyone is paying attention to the same thing. And like for us, I was talking to her about it, and I was like, is this the first time something like this has happened since like 9/11? Where like everything is on pause and everyone is just paying attention to this. And it's like, for us, I was like 10 when 9/11 happened. Like I was young, and we didn't really know, like we had an idea of what was happening, but we didn't know what was being affected in real time. And Emily brought out like in I don't know if you were in the States at that time, but there was like a blackout.
I was. Yeah.
No, not for 9/11, but for
the blackout,
the 2003
the
blackout.
We Blame Canada blackout.
Yeah. There was a blackout in 2003 that was the like pretty much my province and like a lot of the northeastern United States. And she was like, oh, maybe that's like the last thing that like this that kind of like invaded everyone's lives. And I was sitting there and I was like, I was one of the lucky ones that had power back in like a couple hours later. Like for a lot of people, like Emily apparently didn't. Emily apparently got power back like 2 days later. But for me, all I remember out of that, I was like 13. And all I remember out of that was like going to a pizza place that was still using gas ovens because they didn't need electricity. And that's all I remember is like that it was like 6 hours of no power. And and that was apparently, I looked it up yesterday, apparently it was just like a computer glitch or something like that kind of just cascaded into terribleness. But like, this is like a global thing. This is like everyone on earth is paying attention to this thing right now, and it feels very weird, and it feels very like surreal. And obviously, like, talking about coronavirus stuff, I was like, oh damn, Will's in like South Korea. Like, South Korea is like, that's as much as we're kind of like dealing with it here, like, you guys both, I've heard, got hit really hard, but also dealt with it really well. So I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about like,
it's a little weird. So I think in some ways, and you know, I don't want this to be misunderstood, but in some ways I think Korea was fortunate in getting like hit pretty hard early, right, compared to like late and slowly, because it forced, like, there was no other option than to take action, right? So in some ways it was that. Seoul hadn't really been hit too hard. Like, there were some cases here and there of people who had like been to Daegu, or Daegu is the city where like really the original big breakout happened. But right now, there's actually been a couple cases in Seoul of people like who hadn't been to these other origins, who have now tested positive. So there's a potential for danger of like another outbreak. And there were a couple other outbreak cases like right around Seoul. So there's a little bit of concern there. But what was weird to me was like, you know, all through like February and stuff, my phone just starts like going off, right? There's just alarms every day, like multiple of whether it's confirmed cases and where you can find their routes and everything. But the information was so readily available that while it was very weird, right? Because I've also never been in like the heart of something like this, right? I've been impacted, right? I've seen things on the news, but you know, I've never had to like have my phone ringing all the time because of an emergency, basically. So to me, it was weird because I'll be honest. I'll be the first to admit I don't pay as much concern to health related things as I should, especially given that my health has deteriorated quite a bit in recent years. Like, I should pay more attention, but I don't. Like, that's just how I've been, I guess, how I grew up. Not necessarily that my parents brought me up that way, but my personality and my like workaholicness and all of that. Even me, I was looking at my phone. I just think like
there are people who go to the extremes with that, where they think that like nothing can really affect them. But from what I like read and like what I've kind of like seen, it's like I'm at a very low risk from being like killed by this virus. Like, I hate to be use the dramatic wording, but it's like, even if I get it, I'm probably going to be fine. You know, like, even if I get it, I'm probably going to, you know, recover, or by the time there's a vaccine or something like that, or something that like there's going to be adequate care. And maybe that's just like, you know, faith in the Canadian health system. But I'm more worried. Like, I think the general anxiety I'm having is more like my parents and more my grandparents and like people like that who aren't paying attention to things to the degree that I am, or might still have the same feeling that they're younger than they actually are, and they might be more at risk than they themselves realize. Like, if my grandma I know probably doesn't think that she's going to get infected, and she doesn't think that she's at risk for being infected, because she just goes to work and she goes to church and she goes home. And it's like, you know, a part of it is being able to talk to those people and be like, okay, I'm not just, you know, I'm not just being just overreacting here. Like, you need to stay home, and I need to not go to Sunday dinner, because I've been to Toronto a couple times in the last like couple weeks, and I don't know if it's just dormant in my body, you know, like that's the kind of point that we're at right now.
Well, what I was saying was, for me, like, even me who usually doesn't like pay as much concern, right? Like, if I feel like I have the flu, like I used to just like rest, right? I'll just take 6 days, I'll rest, and like won't go to the doctors. I'm like, you know what, it'll pass, right? Or if I'm, you know, if my allergies are getting bad, but I have to work, I'm just like health was always the first thing I sacrificed, which, by the way, for everyone listening, is not the way to live. It is not the way to live, but that was my habit. And even given that personality, being in Korea and like simply my phone popping off all the time, and I'm sitting there like, okay, like I need to take this seriously, right? And this was before for instance, like Seoul at the very least, I know parts of Daegu had pretty severe lockdowns, but Seoul has not had like citywide lockdowns. There have been like buildings and a couple like blocks if they had positive cases, but it's like my neighborhood has gotten quieter, but there were still people there. Like a lot of the restaurants were still open. They might close earlier, but things like that. And yet, I just naturally became more cautious, and it was weird to me that was enough to force someone like me to take this seriously and be cautious. And then it just took so much longer that now these extreme measures had to be taken, in various parts of the West, where now, like, you're and that kind of pushes people into more panic, like you said, right? Because they're just not used to it. Because you just don't know how to, I guess, combat a situation a little bit. Interestingly enough, one of my biggest memories of emergencies, I guess, is when Korea went through the financial crisis way back, like in the late 90s. I remember, like, in the back of my head, I was really young, so I didn't know what was going on, but my dad, like, stocked up, right? He stocked up on, like, not like enough to like hoard, but enough so that, okay, if something went bad, like, we could have food that doesn't perish at home. We could have, like, my dad's very, very strict about being prepared for whatever situation. But it actually, like, worked out because, like, suddenly out of nowhere, like, banks were just shutting down and people were rioting, and like, things got a little crazier. If I look back now, even more so, now that I understand what was going on. So I think for me, like, having gone through that, I'm like, okay, so what does being prepared mean? Like, okay, well, I'm going to buy a little bit extra rice than I normally would, right? Or whatever else, like, you're eating that doesn't perish. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I, like, refill if I'm, so for me, I drink bottled water because I haven't drank tap in a long time, but I'm like, okay, so I should order that, like, before I run out because it might take a while. Like, that's what it takes. It's not like, oh God, what if I have to go into a bunker for 6 months? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, no amount of water I buy is going to prepare me for that anyway. Like, I'm probably going to have to go somewhere anyway if that happens. So I think, like you said, it's a lot of just, I don't think it's fair to say people are being dumb, right? But I think it's just so new that there's a shock factor.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where the panic comes from. And like you said, hopefully it dies out, right? It kind of stabilizes. This is kind of the worst week, like you said, hopefully both in the States and Canada, and things kind of go back to a cycle that can be sustained.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, especially like supermarkets and that kind of stuff, they're basically thinking like, okay, there are going to be people that come in and want to panic buy. And then, well, what happens when we restock from that panic buying? Are all the people that weren't able to get stuff during the panic buy, are those people going to be inspired to panic buy? So it's just like a perpetual cycle of these shelves being cleared. So what we're seeing a lot right now is that people or like stores are basically saying, okay, first hour of the day that we're open, so like 8 to 9 or like 9 to 10 or whatever, is like disabled people and seniors can come in.
Oh, okay.
Everything's stocked. Everything is, clean. Everything doesn't need to be worried about. If you need help finding anything or like dealing with shit, our employees are going to be able to help you. So I think that's going to take away a lot of the stress because, like, these people that might live alone, or they might live in, like, with, say an older, an older partner or something like that, but they're still like, like my grandpa's in a retirement home right now, and they've completely just said, okay, no visitation, no, you can't take you can't take him out, kind of thing, because they don't want to risk them bringing something back for all these people that are, some people that are, pretty close to death, and it's like, you don't want to, make that an issue. So, like, it's more of seeing, like I said, seeing these people that aren't used to being isolated and seeing how they, like, deal with that. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm pretty fine in terms of food. I don't usually buy a lot of food all at once, and, like, right now I'm, like, both trying to say, am I just going to go through all the stuff that I have, and then by the time that I'm done that, like, absolutely no food, am I just going to go, like, I know that sounds weird, but I mean, like, more of the canned goods and stuff, because I have canned goods and stuff that I buy, and then I say, I'm not going to make the recipe that I bought this for, so it just sits in my cupboard, and I'm like, okay, maybe I should just, like, use all of it, and that, because I have enough, like, grains, like pasta, rice, whatever. I don't see the, like, production line for things like pasta and rice shutting down, if that makes sense. Like, you know, I don't see those kind of industries shutting down. So I don't really think that getting some eventually is going to like be a problem. But like for things like I know the joke and the meme is toilet paper, but like I tend to bulk buy anyway. Like I don't like shopping. Shopping is my least favorite chore. I will, you know, I like laundry, dishwashing, whatever is fine. I hate going groceries. Groceries is my least favorite thing because there's the planning of going to go get it. Then there's Then there's dealing with the actual store itself. And I don't have a car. So I don't have a car. So it's either I have to schedule something with a family member, like my dad or my mom or something like that. There I go. I already feel bad saying, hey, do you need to go groceries? Because like I hate like asking for things like that where you're basically saying, okay, I need to go groceries. I'm going to try to make the hit a little less inconvenient by framing it as, hey, do you need to go groceries? So there's that. There's going to the actual store itself. There's the potential of, like, for me, I have a cart. Like, if I'm going by myself, I have like a wire cart in order to like, so I don't have to carry all the bags home with me. And what I'm seeing is increasing amount of stores not like letting you bring those carts inside, because like I live in the downtown of my city, and the downtown of my city is kind of rough. So they don't like people shopping with those carts, but I need it to bring shit home. So there's the awkwardness of, am I leaving it somewhere and potentially getting it stolen? Or am I just arguing with an employee I don't want to argue with, you know? There's a grocery store that's ironically the closest one to me and the most convenient for me to go to. They insist on people locking these carts up in lockers that you use your fingerprint to open and close.
Wow.
And for me, I'm sitting there and I'm like, that's intense. I don't want to give my biomet, like I'm a big privacy nut now in terms of like my personal data and shit. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I don't want to give my fingerprint to a grocery store that I have no idea whether they're storing them online. I have no idea how often they delete them. I've sent emails, I've made calls to just try to figure it out. I've gone there and asked the people, because they have people at the entrance now. You can't just sneak your card in now. They have people at the entrance that say, "Oh,
strict about it.
You have to like put your card in a thing." And I'm like, "Can I use this locker system without?" Because it has like a keypad on it. I'm like, "Can I use this locker system without putting my fingerprint on it?" And they're like, "No, you can't." And I like turned around, went to another store, walked half hour to go to another store because I'm that principled. And it's like now I'm starting to not care as much. Where I'm like, "F it!" Like that's the closest store. And it's probably the one that's most likely to have restocked stuff. So I might care now, or I might not care now. But I don't know, like going through all that and then going like, especially if you're going through like, you get stuck in a line that like is long and annoying. And it's just like kids are screaming and like, it's just a general stressful experience. And I know that sounds really, I just don't like any part of it. I just don't like any part of it. And then you get through the transaction, and then it's the rush of trying to like bag your shit, and people are behind you are like, and I know it sounds silly, but like as a person,
no. It's just funny because it's like it's so complete. Like you're just like grocery shopping.
As someone with it, like I
don't think there's anything wrong with it.
I have a general like social anxiety, and it's just like it's not that bad where I'm just like, oh, I'm crippled to like not shop. But if I have the chance to just not deal with it... But
if you have the choice,
if I have the choice of not dealing with it, that's the thing, though, is that because I have a choice of not dealing with it, I let my food generally get very low before I go shopping. And that means I never really... Like, my parents' fridge... I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you go to your parents' place for whatever, and you open their fridge, and you're like, your fridge is so stocked. Like, your fridge has so much in it. And it's because they have a better habit of going for a lot of little, like, a lot of little trips. And that means that food builds up. And for me, my fridge is empty right now. Like, besides, like, condiments and besides, like, a jug of milk, my fridge is absolutely empty. And because I let it just get to zero, or, like, near zero before I go shopping again, it means, A, the food that I'm buying, I'm consuming in a very short period of time. because it's
Right.
not like I'm buying a ton, because I hate when food spoils and you waste it. But it's also just bad timing, because now this perfect bad timing of when my fridge is running low is when all this panic buying is happening. So all my general like dislike of shopping is now magnified to the 10th degree, because everyone's panic buying, but I have no food. So I'm now looking at it now where I'm like, okay, I got a bunch of chicken in my freezer, got a bunch of frozen vegetables in my freezer, got a bunch of canned, beans and chickpeas and dry rice and that kind of stuff. And that's usually the stuff that I would, use as part of recipes, but not like go through on purpose. And now I'm just going to say, okay, I'm going to just make not shitty meals, but like very boring meals, nutritionally complete meals, but boring ones. Go through all of that. And then by the time that all that's done, maybe things are a little less crazy,
a little better.
That's a gamble, though. That's a gamble, though. That I'm not sure.
You're right. It is a bit of a gamble, but I would think, like you said, it's not that the supply is gone. It's just that the demand like had a blip.
The demand's really huge right now, and
so I wouldn't assume that it would like this scenario would last that long. It might, the stores might still be a little more crowded than usual or whatever, but I would hope that it doesn't get to a point where it turns out that it was a bad gamble, right? I don't think we would get to that point.
Yeah.
And I would hope not.
I think my company, I think my country is generous enough, and like we have, like my country is usually prepared to deal with this kind of stuff enough that like between aid and like if it ever got to the point of like needing like food banks and stuff like that, like I'm in like the sixth biggest city in my country. It's like I'm fine, It's like I'm not going to be going to Toronto for therapy. I've kind of like canceled a lot of my sessions because well, for people who don't know, I go to therapy once a week. It's in another city, and because I've just when I was starting with this therapist, I was living in that city, so I moved a small amount of way, but enough that I can take like an hour bus, and it's really convenient, and comparatively, and I can still go to the same therapist. But I've had off experiences with doing things digitally, because her setup is not amazing. Her setup is iPad on Skype doing video calls, and it's like I almost want to take one of my sessions like for therapy and just like go in and make her setup good. Go and set up something wired and like that kind of stuff, because it's very difficult. And I guess like it's like, when are they going to get to the fireworks factory? We're sitting here like, when are we going to get to the topic of working from home? But one of the things is like the quality of video calls and that kind of stuff, where it's hard to interject and it's hard to have like a very emotionally vulnerable conversation, because you don't want to talk over someone. And it's very hard to make those kind of like physical cues that you would saying, oh, I want to talk now. Because if someone's webcam is terrible or someone's connection is bad, like the last time I did this, like a digital call with them, I did like a 10-minute thing, like a really emotional like thing talking. And then the conversation, like she just roboted back to me. So I had no idea whether she actually heard any of that. I had no idea whether she actually understood any of it. And then it's like you have to get yourself in that emotional space again to be able to repeat yourself. And you're like, I think at that point in that session, I just said, let's just cancel this session. I don't want to do this, because it's just annoying to deal with. And the thing that you don't want to do in a session like that is be exasperated on top of being emotionally vulnerable. Because you're already opening yourself up. You're already talking about stress or trauma or whatever. And then you're like, oh, fuck. Like, come on. This is so annoying.
Sure.
This is
I think that's
frustrating. So I'm in a more stable place than usual right now. Or like I'm kind of in like a good period. And I'm basically just saying, okay, let's just put this on pause until things kind of like get better. And I think things will kind of be fine in that regard. Like, I don't know, usually going to Toronto, and this is something with working from home, is kind of my weekly, like, get out of the house, see things that are different, go to a restaurant or go see people. Cause like most of my friend group is in Toronto. So it's like, I'll go see Emily, or even me and Emily will go to the reference library and we'll go and work, because she's still working for a company, remotely. So like, sure. We have little like work sessions where even if it's just nice to be in the proximity of someone you know, even if you're not really like talking, even if it isn't like a social occasion, if you're just sitting there on laptops, it's still nice to just be around people you know instead of being home alone. And maybe that's something that we can kind of segue into is like, what's your experience like working remotely or like working from home or like that kind of stuff where...
Well, yeah, I was going to say that's a good way to start it. And also I think in relation to what we were saying about people, not being used to the shock factor, right? So I think one of the biggest dangers of working from home is that the shock factor isn't big on day one. You know what I mean? Like you're just like, oh, like I'm at home and it's a little bit more relaxing. Like some people they find out they work better in private, and some people are like, oh shoot, like I'm actually kind of being lazy. But like it doesn't like hit you, right? It's not like day one, like bam, working from home is really difficult. Like that doesn't happen.
I get to wear my pajamas. It's like it's like the unlimited candy. It's like if you had unlimited candy, it's like for the first like 5 minutes, you just be like, oh man, this is great. You know, like I
you just revel in it, and it goes on, and you don't really think about like the effects it might have whether it's become cyclical or whatever else, good or bad, right? There are both. But I think for me, so just a little background for people. I mean, I've worked from home. Obviously, when I first started off in esports, right, as I was just like freelancing like random community stuff, obviously I was like spending all my time at home. And then even at OGN, after like the first year or so, I worked like half the week from home, and then others I would go into the office. At ESL, just depending on the situation, sometimes we've worked from home, and then obviously currently, like I do everything I do from home. And I think the biggest thing is, like you said, you don't realize how important like these light social interactions are until it's too late, right? Until it like has now settled into this bad habit or bad cycle. Because you carry on, and well, I guess like extroverts maybe feel the impact earlier. Like I'm a pretty big introvert, so like I didn't feel it at first. But the moment I felt it was actually when I brought my dog back home. So when I moved to Korea, we had to leave our dog, my dog, with my relatives because my dad doesn't do well with dogs. So I couldn't like bring her to Korea and like leave her at my parents' place. Yeah. And then obviously like I was just not ready to like deal with bringing her to Korea and whatever when I was moving to work for OGN. So I was away from her for like three and a half years. And then I went to LA, and then after like the first year, I brought her back home. And what I realized was how silent I used to be at home. Yeah. Right? Because even with your pet, like you say things, right? You're like, oh, do you want a snack? Like whatever, whatever it is. And depending on how interactive you are, sometimes you like tell them about your day, and then I was like, oh God, I used to live in complete silence like for these years. And then I realized like how much that would probably affect me stress wise. And then I think that's when I really started trying to assess better habits and better factors about working from home. Because then you start to look back and be like, oh, maybe this impacts me like, in a certain way, or maybe that, things like going outside, like you said, whether it's, to work at a cafe or whatever with someone, like you said, even if you're not talking, that type of indirect social interaction, even just getting some sunlight, that, a lot of people often forget how important that is. But I would say actually, something we can start with really, really at a basic level for working from home, for those who haven't done it, is like getting in the work zone physically, right? And when I say physically, I mean your attire, maybe your place in the room, right? Your layout, like that matters a ton, right?
I'm seeing a bunch of, it's like it's like when everyone figured out that you should be drinking more water. It's like everyone thinks that they're smart for tweeting about how you should drink more water, and it's like I'm seeing so many tweets of people who either have work from home experience or who are like learning about working from home. It's like they're tweeting like they're like, I don't want to say they're tweeting like they're intelligent, because that sounds a little mean, but like they're tweeting like they're like, this is some revelation where it's like, oh yeah, you should put on pants and you should like get dressed like you're a regular person and like that kind of stuff. And I wanted to touch on something that you were saying where you kind of realized how certain things were hitting you. And I think part of that comes with age, where when you're young, and especially esports, this kind of ties into last episode where we were talking about like esports and the industry and working at it in a career, is you just do it. Like you just don't, you do things at your personal expense, where you love it so much or you see so much potential at it that you just do things where sleep schedule wise or diet wise, or, you know, I'm going to go live on someone's couch. You know, some people definitely have done the move to LA and live in a big house with like 10 other people kind of thing, just to, you know, make the esports thing work. And once I hit 30, or like once I hit like 28, or, you know, my late 20s, that's when I started to notice all the physical things piling up, where especially with sleep, and something that I'm dealing with right now is that because I work from home, I don't have a strict sleep schedule. And because I'm not covering events anymore, when I was working with EG, my sleep schedule was pretty much dictated around when were events happening, when were games happening for our players. If we were in China, if we were like in Seattle, if we were in Europe, I have a very strict calendar of when matches start. And that is when I am going to wake up. And now with Chillhop, they're like a full office. They're like an office of like 20 people in Rotterdam. And that's 6 hours ahead from where I am right now. And when I wake up, I have maybe like 4 hours of when they're actually still working to converse with them on Slack, or to, you know, if we have any calls, usually it's in the morning. And for me, that's different. Like having that kind of strict schedule, and also having the necessity of being up early, because that's when I'm going to like talk to my coworkers and like kind of get stuff done. It's like I can write, you know, proposals and I can do what I can, but I'm losing a lot of time with people who make decisions and who like implement things. Like I think one of the things that I was used to with EG is that I was pretty much on my own island when it came to social media. I had like an account, I had all the accounts for social media, and I could do whatever I wanted in terms of, you know, tweeting something or like making campaigns or whatever. And now it's like, oh, we have a social media manager, we have a marketing department. I'm not used to like dealing with those people or interfacing with those departments. So having to be up early enough in order to deal with those people, it's different. And it also kind of like has made me rebound in weird ways, where like I would wake up. I think maybe that's a good place to start, is that with sleep, where it's like, I have a problem where I go to bed late, or I have friends. My main Dota stack, like the people that I play Dota with, are on California time. So that's 3 hours behind me. So for them, when I hit midnight, that's 9 p.m. for them. So usually they're getting home from work, or they're like, people talk about like an ideal bedtime of like 9 or 10. That's when people are just like getting done with dinner for me, or like getting ready to like play Dota if we're going to play Dota. And for me, that's a lot of my social interaction with people. So that means that I'm potentially, if I want to like stick around and play more than one game, maybe I'm going to bed at like 1:30 or 2 or 3. And that means you wake up in kind of compensation for that around like 10 or 11 or something like that. And when you're working remotely, it's really easy to be like, okay, as long as my tasks get done, I don't have to like really worry, you know, like there's no real accountability there besides myself, where as long as I'm getting my stuff done, as long as there isn't any problems, as long as I'm awake for the meetings, that's fine. But the thing is that I'm realizing now is that I have to just be way more strict about when I'm going to bed, when I'm waking up, because it causes things to cascade, where because you wake up at 10, all of a sudden you're not tired at midnight. And then maybe you go to bed naturally at 3 instead of being prompted to by Dota or something like that, or playing things with people. And then all of a sudden you're waking up at 11, and then you might go to bed at 4, and then you wake up at noon, and then you might go to bed at 5. And then it just kind of cascades, where to a point where I have a morning all hands meeting for my job at like Monday at 9, and I have this at Monday at 9 or Tuesday at 9:30, and then for therapy I have to be out of the house at 10:45 a.m. in order to get a bus in order to go to therapy. So in a weird way, even though I am working remote, I'm setting all these little appointments that are forcing me to go to bed at a specific time Because if I don't, I know I don't have the self-discipline to be able to just like wake up, go to bed at the same time. Because like, I love playing with my Dota stack. It's a social interaction that I don't normally have, which, I don't have like a physical friend group here, which is something I really regret and something I want to like really start cultivating in the next year. But also I know that when I wake up and I don't have anything to do, there is no greater willpower in me than the one to turn my alarm off and go back to sleep. I know for me that unless I am making it extremely difficult for me to go back to sleep, there's no, like, that's the greatest force on earth. I have my alarm to get up in the morning is my phone into a splitter, because my phone doesn't have a headphone jack. So I need a dongle that does charging and headphones. I have that set up to a speaker that doesn't turn off, that isn't battery powered, so that when I wake up in the morning, I have to, it plays a Spotify thing to a speaker that's always on, so that I have to get up, get out of my bed, go to a different room, unplug my phone, and by the time that I come back, I'm awake enough that I can't just roll over and go back to sleep, but also my blankets are cold, so they're not warm and toasty, so that it's harder to go back to sleep.
You like your bed warm and toasty.
No, I fall asleep cold and wake up hot. That's the thing. I have to fall asleep cold because that's the thing. I don't read in bed, because if you read in bed, then your blankets heat up, and then it becomes annoying. You can't go to sleep. So I've got it to a science, but now I have to break. I have to break my habits. So anyway, I just rambled on about sleep a lot, but yeah, that's part of.
As a complete tangent, I'm just curious. Have you ever tried those like alarms that have like activities?
The puzzles? Yeah. I haven't tried the physical ones, and that's the thing is there was one I had bookmarked for years. I never bought it because it was like $250, but it was a thing. Whoa. It was an alarm that had a wireless keypad on it, and you had to program a PIN number into it, and you could, as long as there was a plug and it was connected to the same Wi-Fi, you'd put it in your bathroom or something like that, right? And then the alarm wouldn't stop until you went to where the keypad was and put in the right PIN. And that's like super next level. And then I remember on ThinkGeek, which was like a site that still is a site that sells like nerd tchotchkes and stuff. Yeah. Basically, there was one that had like, those like block and shape puzzles that like you give to toddlers. Yep. They're like, okay, here's a star and it fits in the star-shaped hole. It's like there was an alarm clock version of that where there was 3 blocks on like shaped platforms, and then when the alarm went off, it would spring them up. It would pop them out. It would pop them out, and the idea was to put them like in places around your room, so that you'd have to get up, get those things, and then put them back in the shaped holes in order to stop your alarm. And I've done like apps on your phone where it would wake you up. Math puzzle. Yeah. It would be like a math puzzle. Me, I'm terrible at math. I'm abysmal at math. So those were fine. But the thing is those are like your willpower scales. Like your willpower
you train to it. Yeah.
Your willpower scales to whatever is the easiest way to get rid of that. Like you learn how to power game it. You learn how to min max. Where all of a sudden you're learning how to like turn off the app instead of dealing with the math puzzle. And then you have to find something that is harder. You have to find something that like has like root access to your phone, that has some kind of, thing. But with Android, I don't know. I think it's the same with iOS now, where you can set through the default alarm app, you can set a Spotify playlist in order to play instead of like an alarm tone. And with Android, you can definitely do that. And I just made the chill hop. I took the chill hop playlist and just set that on random shuffle, and it's a lot more enjoyable than an alarm tone. And for me, I'm definitely very susceptible to like earworms where it gets stuck in my head. And if it's the right song that gets stuck in my head, I'm not going back to bed. Like, because I can't clear my mind very well in order to go to sleep. So, I don't know. I don't know if sleep is something that's as difficult for you as it is for me, but
Well, I mean, so sleep is now. So for those who don't know, I had a really, so like throughout my life, I've always had like stress-induced insomnia now and then.
Yes,
and then
exactly.
Last year I had a really bad bout of just like straight up insomnia for like almost 3 months. Where it was absolutely miserable. And as someone who had like dealt with stress-induced insomnia as like temporary things, that was just like a whole different experience that I would never wish upon anyone. But anyway, so currently, like, because that has, like you said, human bodies work on a cycle, that has broken my cycle so much. I still have trouble, like my stream knows now and then, like, I just like I'm like cranky or tired because I just couldn't sleep the night before, or like I just stream again like at night because I woke up and I just couldn't go back to sleep. But I think there's two things though. Like what you mentioned about sleep is I mean, that's just like a generally good principle, right? Like even if you're not working from home,
I know, right?
more so where you have to like, I guess, force it if you're working from home, because I guess if you go to the office, it's just automatically that device is there. But I think a tie-in to that, somewhat unique to working from home, is I think what most people, especially like you said, maybe younger people who are more motivated, or especially if you're in like a field where you're passionate, such as esports, as people often are when they get into the field, is you don't realize the reverse impact of, like, most people, like, especially as you get older, as Matt has said, you learn about the default worries that you should have, or alerts you should have, of like, maybe I get too lazy, right? Or maybe I'm not using my time efficiently.
Oh,
but
God,
a lot of
that's
times
the worst.
we're not. Yeah, right. But a lot of times we're also not taught about the reverse factor of, like, maybe I'm now training myself to always be in work zone, and like I'm not letting myself go, right? And workaholics know exactly what I'm talking about, even in the office. But this is an even bigger danger in a working from home environment, because there's no physical change, right? You're in your house, and if you're like living alone, or if you're just living with a partner, it's going to be a smaller space, whether it's one bedroom or maybe a studio, and now there's no change of pace around you physically. So you have to actually put in so much mental effort to start work and stop work. And both of those, like, we often only worry about the starting part, where we're, like you said, it's very easy for us to be like, oh, well, I can take it a little slow because I'll get my job done today. That's one side of the worry. But the other side is, let's say you go down that route, and then now, like, you finished your job, but there was never a clear ending, right? You like submitted whatever, let's say it's a report. You submitted a report, you sent the email, and you're like done, but it's like technically office hours, but you're kind of done with your work, and maybe the company's a little lax because of the current situation, and you guys are chilling on Discord. And again, having social interactions, I think, is good throughout the day with your coworkers, but there is a very distinct danger of, if that border starts to get grayed out later, it not only gets harder to start work, but it gets harder to stop work.
And it's also a weird thing that you were saying, that with the company, where if the company has an expectation, that's another thing with working from home or working freelance, is you have to set your own boundaries. Not only, you have to respect yourself above the company, and that's something that, especially if you're in a situation where you're working from home, you might think it's like a treat, or you might think the company is also always like already, I don't want to say treating you, but already like at a disadvantage from having you work from home, because you're sitting there and you're like, oh, I can do all this stuff. I can, not have to get dressed, or I can go do laundry, or I can go whatever. I can do all these things. I don't have to, I can watch Twitch on my other monitor and no one's paying attention and blah, blah, blah. And you can already think that you're already at an advantage, and you're already being treated by doing that. And then you think, oh shit, because I'm already in a situation where I'm at an advantage, I guess, then you start thinking, oh, I need to start working like in proportion to that. And then your company kind of takes advantage of that, where they expect you to, like, we already kind of like deal with this is general working as millennials in the 2020s, is we're already attached to the hip to Slack and Discord and email because we have phones. So we're expected to always be on. So being able to, like, it's not only a personal thing, but it's also setting boundaries for your workplace, where your workplace can't expect you to be on all the time. And it's different in esports because they're always like, when I've always thought about when I get burned out, and that's probably what's spoken loudly, like you were saying about stress-induced insomnia, and when you were talking about that, I showed my webcam on my stream. I have a 2-week sleep diary worksheet in front of me because I went to a sleep study for the first time.
Oh, right.
And they gave me just a giant table where I'm supposed to fill in and shade in with a pencil when I'm going to sleep and when I'm waking up and when I'm waking up during the night and when I'm taking medication and when I'm drinking caffeine. And for me, like, it's the exact same thing. I went to that sleep study and they were like, you probably don't have sleep apnea because you're 30. And apparently, like, it's more apt in men, and it's more apt in men who are older. And my dad's dealing with that right now. And he's saying, oh man, I used to stop breathing 50 times an hour. And now I stop breathing with the CPAP machine, like the machine that you sleep with.
Right.
That keeps pressure in your lungs and your respiratory system. He's gotten that down to like 2 times an hour. And he's basically said, it's like I'm like getting rest for the first time. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh man, that's amazing. I want that because I don't sleep very well. So when you brought up like stress-induced insomnia, it's the same thing. I have anxiety. Like, you know, the person was like, yeah, it's probably related to anxiety. And what I was doing was I was coping with caffeine. I was coping with energy drinks, and I was coping with tea. And for me, I love tea. And for people watching my stream, I have an entire shelf devoted to tea behind me. I love tea, and I also, working for a company that was sponsored by Monster, I like, it wasn't so much that I was getting free ones, it was that brand loyalty, and there was like, it
becomes a part of your lifestyle.
It becomes a thing where you're just like, oh yeah, I can just, it's there and it's available and it's part of the gimmick, so to speak. And it got to a point where that's how I felt awake during the day, and that's how I felt like that I needed to function, and that led to headaches and withdrawal and like not being able to sleep, and it accelerated the sleep anxiety. I was already anxious, but then there was the thought of, if I'm trying to go to bed right now, or if I'm trying to fix my sleep schedule, I'm gonna be laying in bed for like 3 to 4 hours, and all I'm gonna be doing is thinking about dumb shit, where it's like anxiety about work or anxiety about my life or whatever. And that's going to make it harder tomorrow. And especially like last week when we were trying to put this podcast together, I woke up 10 times the night before this podcast because I was in a bad sleep schedule. Like, I was in a bad cycle, but I was always like, okay, me and Will talked about this. I need to be awake in order to do it. We're committing to a live stream on top of recording it audio. So, I want to be able to do that. I need to, I got to do whatever XYZ that day. And that's good, but it's also like an anxiety thought where you're just like, if I'm not able to do this, what is the consequences of that? And that contributes to not being like, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy where you're worried about that stuff so much that it helps like keep you from sleeping. So I don't know. The best time I've had in the last maybe like 6 months was a 3-week stretch where I was getting off the computer at 9 p.m. my time. I was going and I was reading manga on my e-reader because I figured out I have an e-ink e-reader that doesn't do like the blue light and isn't a monitor. So I was getting off at 9 p.m. I was reading manga for an hour, regardless of whether I had read it before or whatever. I have a couple series, like you can read One Piece. One Piece is like 1,200 chapters now or something like that. You can start One Piece and it's not a thing you're going to binge read in a day. So like being able to do that and get away from a screen and get a schedule for like 3 weeks, I was doing that and playing like Ring Fit Adventure on my Switch every day, where I was doing that at like 7 p.m. I would have a dinner around 5, wake up. Then I would start waking up naturally before my alarm at 9. For the first week, I had a strict alarm at 9 where I was just waking up every day at 9. I had this alarm system like I was telling you. But then like week 2, I started waking up like naturally at 8:30, and I was like, damn, that's something that I've never done. Where I would wake up at 8:30 and my first instinct wasn't to go back to sleep because I could. I would just say, okay, well, this is why I'm awake now, or I'm awake now. Let's just go. And that takes such like a terrible amount of discipline, that when you're working and when you can say to yourself, well, I'm getting my job done, I'm getting my task done, let's play Dota until 3 a.m. because I haven't seen these people in a while. It sucks because you're sitting there and you're like, I have to restrict, like something that I've been talking about in therapy is I have very poor boundaries for myself, where that sounds really extreme, but it's like, it's very easy for me to say, okay, I'm going to eat XYZ for dinner. I'm going to stay up X hour. I'm going to stay up till 3 a.m. playing Dota.
Sure.
Because the boundaries for myself are very small. Is it affecting work? That's my boundary.
I see.
That's my total boundary for myself is it affecting work? And is it preventing me from making money to stay in this apartment? That's the boundary for me right at the moment. If it ever got so bad that I was in danger of getting fired, and that because of getting fired, I would presumably have a harder time finding a new job because A, you don't have the reference, you have the gap in the resume, and I have a very good job right now. I love my job. Why would I want to get rid of a good opportunity like this, right? So those are the boundaries I have for myself. But it's almost a weird thing where you need to go above and beyond that because you're worth that. Like I said, with esports, it's easier to break those boundaries down because you're saying, at least I have a job I like. At least I'm going to these events, or at least I'm getting to watch video games as my job, or at least all I really have to do is tweet for my tasks. It's really easy to break your personal boundaries down for social life and for your personal health when you're young and you're saying, I'm lucky that I even have this in the first place. It's still fine to think you're lucky. It's still fine to think that, the job that you have is really good and you don't want to take that for granted. But you almost have to have even bigger boundaries for yourself, because you will start feeling that lack of physical boundaries of not going to the gym or eating too much. You will start feeling that social boundaries of not going out to volleyball or not having people to talk to, And like I said, as you get older, it just starts impacting harder and harder and harder. And Jesus Christ, it's like now, like I said, at 30, now I'm trying to fix all these things at once. And it's hard. It's very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. The thing is, though, and not to sound cynical.
No, of course.
But, I guess this is why the whole boomer meme exists. But yeah, it's like you won't know until it hits you. Right?
Yeah, you won't know until it hits you.
Yeah. I don't know about you directly, personally, but most of us, our parents have told us about this stuff, right? They've warned us about discipline, and you some of us learn a little bit more than others in different scenarios. But everyone has this reckoning moment, right? Where you're okay, I gotta take better care of myself. So I think it's one of those things where, so the way I've seen it, and this comes from personal experience of looking back and being oh yeah, I didn't learn things until I just it just hit me, right? No matter how many times
it has to make sense to you. It has to make sense to your
sure.
brain, and you don't get that impetus. It doesn't make sense to you until you feel consequences or until you feel evidence that it's something worth believing. And I don't mean to cut you off. It was just more of this thought of, especially with talent, I imagine this is a thing where after the event, you have the choice of go to the after party or sleep. And at some point, as you get older, your choice is, after an event, you're I would rather do nothing in my hotel room or prepare or get extra sleep before my flight than go to the after party and schmooze and network and maybe get my next job or maybe make a new friend or whatever, or maybe just have a good time. There's that thought of, the evidence for me is I've done this long enough that I know it sucks ass to try to be really tired or hungover while flying, or I know that I rather prize sleep. Or I think about Sir Action Slacks. Sir Action Slacks does not go to after parties. After he's done events and stuff, he goes to his hotel room and does nothing because he has a wife that he likes to call, and that's his thing, or he just needs to decompress. And at some point, he needed to have that revelation or that evidence that says, it's worth listening to myself in this. It's okay to listen to myself, and it's worth it to do it this way.
Yeah, I mean, I think for talent, and this is going to a whole different conversation,
course,
so I don't want to sit on it too long. But I think for talent, it is, from my experience and from what I've seen, it's actually usually like extreme ends of one or the other, right? So for me, no, like being an introvert, other than the first couple, like I guess like maybe even just like the first year of doing like official talent work, I like didn't go to most after parties, right? Or I'd literally go in just to say like hi and thank you to the people I wanted to, and then like leave. And a lot of times, like, you know, people would, you know, jokingly, like the close ones would like make fun of me for it, or, you know, they'd try to like goad me into staying, and I'd be like, you know, just, you know, not, I just want to go sleep, you know, or I just want to go watch TV in my room. But then like for talent, just so people are aware, like, cause oftentimes I also see people being like taking it the wrong way and being like, oh, like the talent like went out for the after party, but like they have another event next year or whatever, and they're like, oh, like they misunderstand it. And for a lot of times, sometimes I can only imagine that this is similar to some pro players in different games and structures. Talent, like, you get so ingrained into the cycle that your social group is the talent, right? And so therefore that time is now actually like you gauge it more valuable, and personally I respect that, right? For me it's health plus my personality, so I don't rate that social interaction as highly as maybe going to my room and decompressing. But for those who do, like, I think it eventually goes into two ends, and that's to me, this is from my personal observation, I think that's also just like the two ends and types of people that are drawn to talent work. But
I think that's a different conversation.
Exactly. That's a whole different topic, so I don't want to get into it. But I think going back to like working from home and discipline, what I wanted to say was, so, you know, I think like we can sit here, and if we wanted to, not that this podcast is meant for that, but if we wanted to, like, you know, preach to, you know, the young kids about how to live their lives, like we could do that, but I don't think the impact would be good. But now, like we've started, the reason we started talking about this is because now people are being more or less like forced into this new environment of working from home. And it's more of a, you know, it's not a, you have to do this or this is the only way to do it. But I think it's more of an awareness of not even just like health and long-term like health benefits or impact, but I think you really have to put into perspective how much the little things matter. For instance, like, how much did it matter that I would get up from my seat and go to get a cup of coffee at the kitchen in the office, like every day around 1:30, right? Like, how much did that mean to me? It doesn't feel like it now. And at home, I probably do a different cycle. I probably don't walk as much to the kitchen, right? Because it's closer. Or, you know, maybe you have a partner and sometimes you like bring each other food or whatever, and that's fine. But, you know, that, like, there's actually just so much to think about that if you really wanted to get technical, right? Of maybe there's the act of you're now getting up and you're like letting your body stretch a little bit, and maybe you're having a water cooler chat with your coworker, and like we started earlier, like I said in the very beginning, this doesn't hit you initially because you're sitting at home and it's so relaxing. And you're like, oh, this is cool. Like, this is chill. Oh, I can like video chat. And I can see my coworker's pet. And like you said, Matt, maybe I can watch some Twitch on the side. And it seems all cool until you realize, like 2 weeks later, oh, I haven't talked to anyone in a long time about anything out like other than work, right? Or, you know, I haven't like gotten up from my chair in 3 hours. And as funny as it sounds, what I've noticed actually is sometimes people at work, like in an office setting, sometimes they'll like get up on purpose because they want to stop working, right? Because they hate their office environment. They'll be like, you know what, I'm going to like purposely go to the bathroom another time because I just need a break from this like cubicle. But that's actually helpful because now you're not just sitting in the zone and turning your environment into this amoeba of, should I be like stressed to a healthy level, or should I be relaxed? Because most people, not everyone, most people generally wind down when they get home. And so now when you're at home all the time, your body starts to like freak out. And I can't explain this scientifically. I know I've read some things here and there, but coming from personal experience,
like it's a culture shock.
Your body has trouble like comprehending, do I need to be a little bit on edge, right? Like, do I need to focus, or like, am I chilling and watching whatever TV show I want, right? And so I think the biggest thing like I think I just worry about that because it impacts people differently, and so the conversation is going to get harder if the awareness isn't there that this type of stuff is necessary. So then once it impacts people, once it impacts people separately, like some people will get maybe like more depressed because maybe they were so work focused and now they've lost their focus and drive because of the way the bad habits built up. Maybe others, react differently to that. And now the conversation is a whole different beast than, hey, like we should have a chat, or like, hey, you want to talk about, that whatever happened on Twitch yesterday or whatever else it might be, depending on your industry.
Well, like it's a funny thing where, like I brought up earlier, how awkward it is over video conversations to go through a therapy session, and it's like it's something we're figuring out like right now, where it's like if you and I were in the same room doing this podcast as opposed to doing this digitally, we would be able to like motion with our hands, or like to be able to like, or at least be physically, you'd be able to pick up on the physical cues of wanting to step into the conversation or wanting to contribute something. And even doing that digitally, it's difficult. And like, obviously it's just funny because we're learning how to like bounce off of each other when it comes to the conversation. But yeah, it's your body getting used to it. And it's also like, for me, I always thought that when it comes to information and when it comes to people learning something by doing, you almost want to just throw out as much as you can for free, or as much as you can that people might be able to take little bits from. And what I'm seeing, like you mentioned, I think what wanted to be like a major part of this conversation was the thought of separating your office environment. And for me, when I was looking for a place here, I was looking for either a 2-bedroom or I was looking for a 1-bedroom plus den, because I wanted a place that was, I wanted to use the den or the 2nd bedroom as a dedicated office. And even then, it's like, that's one of those things that people are like, oh yeah, you need to have a separate workspace and you need to get away from your bed and you need to not work in bed, because then your body gets confused about what you're using your bed for. And that's cool, but it's also a thing now where I'm like half in it, where because my office is technically like, when something I talked to my therapist about is that my default state is being on the computer. And I know that sounds really pathetic, but it's like it's where my entertainment is. Like if I'm not doing anything, I'm watching Twitch or I'm playing a video game, or if my social interaction is playing Dota with people, that's still to do with my computer. I use the same workstation for work as I do that. So I still have that weird separation, but at least I'm not working out of my bedroom. At least I'm not working out of my living room. And what I was saying earlier about reading manga, part of that was getting out of this office and going into my living room. And like, I have a couch, like I have a sectional couch that I never use because I'm not the type of person to game in front of a TV. I don't use my console games. Like my consoles are hooked up to capture cards in my computer, so that I can play them in Windows on my computer rather than on an actual TV. And so that means my living room doesn't get a lot of use unless I'm hosting someone. And so yeah, getting out of this, like getting away from this workspace and actually like getting to use that living room and getting away from it. It's like what you were saying about the routine of having little things. It's like, that's why I'm glad I got plants. I got plants to talk to, but I also got plants that in the morning, they're in my bedroom because how my apartment is situated, that's the only place where they can get good light from like all angles. Yeah. And if I didn't have those plants, I wouldn't open my blinds because I'd wake up, I'd get out of bed, turn on the light, go get dressed, whatever. And then when I'm going to bed at night, just go, I make my bed every day. And that's another dumb little thing that I never used to do. But now I do it because it's a routine, and it also shows you're not using your bed anymore. Make your bed, and then when you're using your bed at night, you can mess it up again, whatever. But just little small things, like you said, adding up, where it's like making my bed and also opening my blinds every day. It's saying you're not using your bedroom, get the fuck out of bed. Get your day underway. Your plants need light or else they're going to die. And, you're not using your bed anymore. So I don't know, like this is already going long in terms of like the talking about like this kind of thing, but you can easily spread working from home to a billion different podcasts, and like a bunch of different episodes. And that's why there's a cottage industry around instructing people how to do this. But
Right.
I think at least, like we were saying, it's just routine. It's having strict boundaries for yourself because they do benefit you. But it's also like nice in the sense that so many people now are learning how inconvenient it is to work from home. Or, well, like they're learning that it isn't a treat. Like I was listening to a podcast yesterday and they were talking about how someone was saying that they lost their job because they were like physically disabled, couldn't work from home. And their job basically says, sorry, we can't accommodate you working from home. We it doesn't work for the workflow. It doesn't work for blah, blah, blah. And then the next week, this coronavirus thing happened. And she's basically saying, well, okay, the entire company is working from home now.
Oh, yeah.
And now I have a lawsuit because I can say they just wanted to get rid of me, So with so many people now experiencing working from home or experiencing how difficult it is or experiencing maybe how easy it is or how it isn't breaking their business, if that makes sense. Like I think a lot of people say, okay, we can't have you work remote because we don't trust you and we think you're just going to screw around the whole day. A lot of people finding out that it isn't the case, or a lot of people finding out that it's harder. It builds empathy with people and it builds like sympathy because all of a sudden people never had the opportunity or the impetus to work from home. They never had the reason to care. And now if their entire office, like it's with Discord and like other companies now basically saying, okay, well, we have a limit of like 5 people on a video call. We're going to make it free in order to do up to 50 now during all this quarantine time. Now people are understanding, oh, it isn't as hard as we thought it was in order to accommodate workers in order to work from home. But it's also like people experiencing, oh, it's not as easy as I thought working from home. So my thought is, okay, at least people are understanding, and at least now we might have a different work culture when we go back to work because everyone now has to experience it all at once. Like that's what's so interesting about this quarantine and stuff like that is that everyone has to do it. No one is accepted. So it means something is happening worldwide that everyone is being affected at once. And that's very rare. That is very rare that every country is dealing with something at the same time. Like even with 9/11 that we were talking about before, there were countries that could just say, oh, this doesn't affect me, or this was something that happened in a different country. I'll forget about it the next day.
Well, of course, yeah.
Or I'll forget about it, in a month or something like that. This is affecting each country equally as bad, and everyone is changing their habits at once. And that's fascinating to me. That's something that doesn't happen very often in the context of history. It's not a world war, but like it's something the world has to deal with at once. And maybe I don't mean to be insensitive in terms of like equating coronavirus with like 9/11 or like the mass death of like a world war, but at the same time it's you can feel history happening. You can feel something happening that is affecting how humans are developing worldwide, and that's very rare. That doesn't happen very often, and that's very kind of like exciting to me.
I just want to say I think you have a lot more faith in humanity than I do. Because I'll be honest, I don't think this is going to bring about as much change as some people are either wishing or predicting, in terms of like work habit or work style.
No, I get it. I get it. I'm being optimistic.
And not to right. And not to mention, so I just want to put it out there for me personally, as much as I both enjoy and also understand the hardships of working from home, I don't want people to get the wrong idea of like, so in the cases of, obviously there are those cases where, right, like for instance, someone was unfairly told they couldn't work from home, and like that's a special case. But I also don't think like this is an excuse for people to rise up and be like, so like exactly. We should be able to work from home.
Everyone should work from home,
right? Right, and that's my biggest concern. So what ever since I guess there's been several incidents that have caused this, but right, more echo chambers have obviously become a very big thing with social media, and so I try to be much more aware of that. And every time I look at my Twitter feed, I'm like, okay, but I'm looking at a feed of like people who are super used to technology, right? And a lot of us have worked from home before, and I'm like, okay, this is a very select few, right? And even I would say even actually my my sister and my brother-in-law would not be as used to this. Well, I guess my brother-in-law's worked remotely quite a bit, but anyway, like these environments, I think I just want people, again, new to working from home, whether you're learning the positives or negatives of it, like you have to keep, I think, both sides in play a little bit, and like don't go back to work once this is over and be like, oh, so now we know our company's evil, right? Like that's not always, like maybe sometimes it's the case. I can't speak for every company, but
like
I
just did a bad job.
Like I'm a strong. No, I know. I'm not trying to contradict you. I just want the listeners to kind of understand, and also I just want to put it out there that personally, I'm actually a huge stickler for like systems when it comes to work.
Well, no, it's boundaries. Like I said, like I have poor boundaries.
Right, like boundaries. Yeah. But like more so even at a personality level, like I will always choose a gray, dull-looking cubicle over like a cool-looking, somewhat open.
I hate open offices.
Layout.
I hate open offices, and I think a lot of people are starting to really rebound against that. I would love an office that either I have a cubicle or I have, like I said, boundaries. I have a forced like thing where I can say, don't bother me, I'm doing work. Or like, I don't need a fun office. I don't need foosball tables. I don't need, free snacks. If I could give up all those like millennial perks of like Google offices and stuff, like for a strict go home time, I would in a second.
Sure. And I think we keep branching off to these other things, but I guess where I wanted to go with that was, I think, again, it all comes back to what we've been reiterating several times about, whether it's like discipline or, being aware of these small factors. And I think personally, like, I think it'd be nice to maybe share just a couple of tips that we've personally employed. Like you've obviously mentioned one thing with sleep. But for me, like maybe a lot of our listeners have already heard this 1,000 times, but so back when I first started really working from home regularly with OGN and I started living alone and not with a roommate, one of the few things I had to really change was as soon as like I would get up, I might eat my breakfast a little more leisurely, right, because I don't have to go out, but as soon as I know what time I'm working, like I would change, right, and I would change into clothes that wasn't that comfortable in terms of like home clothes. Maybe it's jeans, like it's stuff that I would go wear, maybe not to the office all the time, but at least like to the cafe, right? So like jeans and a different shirt, definitely get out of the PJs. I would always make sure like that I brush my hair and do all of that, because again, it just puts you in this different mode, and that way when you're done and you like change back to your comfy clothes or your PJs or whatever, it feels even better. So that's one of the things. One thing that came up actually as you were talking about like gaming and your TV and your couch is actually, it's funny you mentioned that. For the longest time in LA, even once I got a capture card so I could like stream Call of Duty on the PS4 and things like that, I would intentionally reconnect it to my TV if I was ever playing not for work or for stream, so that I could like get in that relaxation zone. Obviously you can't really do that with PC games, or generally it's not advised because of whatever other technical advantages you might have with a monitor, but for the longest time, and some games like I didn't like on a big screen, and I still like forced myself to play on a big screen because I was like, if I don't sit back on a couch and play this, it's gonna start like I'm gonna tense up. It's gonna start feeling like work. And so it's these, it might sound silly like you've mentioned, Matt, but I think it's one of those things where you got to figure out these little gimmicks for yourself, gimmicks to get you in the zone and then gimmicks to get you out of the zone. So aside from, the thousands of other advice and tips that are floating around right now in terms of like schedules and maybe diet, and I know a lot of people are trying to encourage more like digital social interaction. I saw a cool tip of people recommending, maybe some of these days, like eat lunch with your coworkers over like a video call. Yeah. Which, like I've never thought about that, but that, things like that are cool, but also just for yourself. For me, the clothes thing was one of the biggest things. And then, like when I'm playing, like also always making that a different environment. So that's just something I wanted to share, for people in case it works for you as well.
Yeah, no, for me, like a lot of the same things, like I see the wisdom, or I see like the applications of all those things. Like for me, I'm bad about sweatpants, because sweatpants are like, they're not pajamas because you don't wear them to bed, but they're
True.
also, you can technically go outside with them and not feel too terrible. But at the same time, when you said
True.
jeans, I was like, I put on jeans specifically for that reason, where I'm like, okay, these are real pants. These are things that are slightly
Yeah.
uncomfortable, and like you said, they're like, they don't have to be uncomfortable, because you want well-fitting clothes. But at the same time, it's like, with this, I'm glad this podcast puts me on camera, because it makes me brush my hair and put on a decent shirt, and that kind of stuff. Because if it was just all audio, I'd still probably be in my pajamas. But the sorry, Will. one day you'll earn
I
getting.
I understand.
No, the thing that I wanted, if I had to like boil it down to one, because like we've talked about a lot of stuff, but the thing that mattered the most for me was, when you mentioned filter bubbles, and when you mentioned like echo chambers and stuff like that. Filter bubbles are a good way of putting it, because like if you Google that term, filter bubbles, you'll come up with it, probably like the essay of explaining about that kind of stuff. But volleyball really friggin' helped me, because even if you're
that's good.
Well, even if you're not only from a physical perspective, but also from a social one, where even if you're having lunch with your coworkers virtually or whatever, it's still a very you kind of forget how the world works. Like you kind of forget how like, this is going to sound super elitist, but you kind of forget how normal people are. Like you kind of you kind of get in this like weird, like it's the criticism of Silicon Valley.
Let's say other people are.
No. I know. I'm about to contextualize that.
Okay.
It's like how people like, one of the criticisms of Silicon Valley and stuff like that is that you have all these people in very affluent or very like well-to-do jobs that are in like San Francisco, and like they're all in this one area, so they kind of don't know what the rest of the world is like. They kind of like, if they're making decisions, it's like Stadia, where it's like, oh, we think Stadia will work, but it doesn't, because because the US doesn't have good internet in a lot of places, right? But it does in San Francisco, and it works fine in Mountain Valley, where Google is. So, that's a blind spot for them, right? And the thing is with volleyball is the same thing with me, where going to volleyball every week, you're meeting people who are different, and I hate, like, it's not like I'm saying, oh, I'm going down from my ivory tower in order to talk with the plebes. No, it's, these people aren't better or worse than me. It's just like, they're different, and you have to like reestablish your context, like how you interact with the world. And you almost kind of get like a little bit of a wake-up call and saying, okay, I'm isolated a little too much in my own filter bubble with people who are either agreeing with me, or people who are feeling the same way, or who like the same things or act the same way. And then all of a sudden, like if you're going to, like if you're working at a library, or if you're going to a farmer's market, or if you're going to volleyball or playing in a beer league or something like that, you're working with people who have no idea what esports are. And that's humbling in a good way. It's all of a sudden you don't have that context of, oh, I'm a full-time worker in a very volunteer-based industry, or, I'm a talent, or like I have, like, it's so stupid, but even talking to my cousins, I say that I'm verified on Twitter, and they're mystified. They're like, oh my God, that's so, I'm like, no, it doesn't matter. It isn't special. It isn't something that matters. So when you start going, or like spending time around people where that doesn't matter to them, and you're not like cool, if that makes sense, you get that kind of humbling factor where you all of a sudden just have to like learn how to like be a regular person again. And I'm very much I'm a proponent of that. I love that. I don't live in Toronto for a reason, because I like being, like, my city is pretty big, but it's still very blue collar, and it's still very rough in certain areas. And I live in a very like modernish building, but it's surrounded by a lot of roughness, and I'm cool with that. I like that, because it kind of keeps me grounded, and it keeps me getting to inside my own ass, like it kind of keeps me from getting cocky, or it keeps me from getting too elitist, or it keeps me from getting too comfortable. And especially, like I said, if you're working from home a lot, sure, it's uncomfortable to go and work like with people. Like that was one of the things going to work for EG in Seattle for like, there was a time I went for a weekend or a couple days, or like we had meetings and I just stayed there and covered stuff from the office. It sucked because I had to cover like, okay, sorry, let me rephrase. In my current context, it sucked because covering events from home is great because esports events are all breaks and it's all waiting for your team to get up to the plate.
Yes.
So if you're at an office and you have to do that same waiting, and you can't, wear sweats, and you can't just, be lazy, or you can't, do all the gross stuff that when no one's watching, you can just get away with. If you do that in an office, it's really uncomfortable and it kind of stinks. But that's more of like, if I was doing that full time, if that was my day to day, I'd probably be used to it and probably be fine. And I would probably adapt to it in a way that, made things work. And I'd probably appreciate actually going home at the end of the night. And something that when I did do that, even though the events were done, I was still sticking around the office because people were playing Dota or people were playing games or whatever. And that's maybe another topic for like, that kind of playground workplace, if that makes sense, where they're encouraging you to stay at the office and stay in the work culture for a really long time. You have to be able to set that boundary for yourself that, no, I'm going home. And I'm not like, there's also the thought of, oh, if I stick around the office, maybe people are getting dinner, and then people like, maybe the company buys dinner and that's money I don't have to spend. But it's like, it's the same thing with working from home. There has to be a time where you switch off. There has to be a time where you have the boundaries for yourself to like just go from work to home. I don't know. Maybe that's a good place to just end things off, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's like junk food. Like I said, you start off just being like, oh man, I can eat candy all the time. I have unlimited snacks. And then you're like, oh wait, this kind of sucks after a while. I have to like moderate it so that I don't hate candy as a whole, but I'm not like just, overloading on sugar or making myself fat and making myself feel terrible day after day just because I can. So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of been the point. I guess just one thing I want to leave for people is it's okay if you don't enjoy working
100%,
from home, right?
100%.
Like there's like the stigma that working from home is great, and it's okay if like people just work differently, you focus differently. So maybe you think this sucks, and that it's okay to think that and voice that.
100%.
And if you do love it, like I think Matt has emphasized, just be aware of the dangers that may come with a bad habit. But otherwise, listen, I mean, like you said, Matt, I think one of the more important things is a large portion of the world is going through like this exact same exercise at the moment. So talk about it, right? Talk about it. Ask questions to those around you who maybe have that experience. Experiment a little bit. And then, as Matt has been so optimistic and hopeful, and maybe me not as much, but maybe this can affect, work culture a little bit more positively when things go back to a quote unquote more normal cycle, right? Like even if you're in the office, maybe we've built other better habits or whatnot. So that's the biggest hope. Obviously the virus is affecting a lot of other things other than working from home. But we don't have the time to talk about everything all at once.
No,
so
of course.
I think we just wanted to talk about working from home today. And I personally, I just hope, it's helped some people, or maybe you can share it with someone who's very new to working from home, and it'll get you some ideas.
Yeah. So, Will, what are you doing this week? Are you just sticking around with Warzone, or where can people find you?
Yeah, I mean, this week, obviously the streams continue pretty much every day. If you're wondering, honestly, this month it's insane for first-person shooter games or third-person shooter games. So for me, it's been mostly Warzone and Division. I know the Division is a game that's quite split in terms of its fandom, but I've been a big fan. I'll be streaming here and there. I've been putting a lot more focus on actually being able to kind of just provide a place for people to hang out. If you have questions about, how to cope with things during this time of whether it's working from home or like quarantine, or, if you're not sure of the virus, not that I'm an expert, but, also being in Korea, I feel like I've been exposed to maybe more resources than some other people. feel free to come. If I'm not certain of something, I would tell you and I would guide you otherwise. But you can find me on social media, both Twitter and Instagram, and then Twitch, all/Will Chobra. My Instagram's actually been pretty empty, so I should probably work on that a little bit.
I'm really proud of you for getting all the same username on all the same platforms. That's
we talked about it last week, but it was all thanks to you, man.
No.
It's been very helpful. And then, of course, I have a couple other content pieces that I do during the week. In fact, I say tomorrow for Korea, but in about, I guess, like 12 hours or so. So you can stay tuned for that about like Korean esports. But yeah, all/Will Chobra. You can find me almost every day on at least one of those platforms. And I'm usually pretty open to talk about kind of whatever's at hand. So don't be afraid. What about you, Matt?
I am still I'm still like in that weird phase where my setup is complete, but now I'm wondering what to do with it. It's like yesterday I got the final piece of my dream stream setup. I got a dummy battery. So it's basically a battery you put in your camera that makes it has a battery in it, but you can power it off of USB or like a plug-in. So basically you're not wearing a battery down when you're using your camera for a long period of time. And that was something that I wanted because my camera I can charge in USB while I'm using it, but it's going to wreck that battery eventually. So like I said, everything's in place. It's just a matter of I have this sleep issue where I'm basically saying to myself, okay, let's fix the sleep issue. Then we'll think about streaming. Let's figure out how we figure out sleep and how that interfaces with the job. Let's get a new schedule going. Then we'll go back to, sleep, like maybe streaming once or twice a week and maybe kind of working from there. So, but if you're interested in my other stuff, I do contribute to Twitter and Instagram a little bit more than the other places. You can find me at Matt Demers, all one word. That's the awkward thing is like I've never had a handle and it's very awkward to spell my last name. So it's MattDemers pretty much everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch. I don't know. I don't really think I'm probably going to be writing a blog about something on mattdemers.com this week somewhere, but it should be fun.
Cool.
But yeah, thank you so much for listening to this second episode. It's been a little bit longer than we thought, but you'll be able to find it on gmncast.com. We're up on Spotify, Google Play Music. I'm still working on Google Podcasts, which is apparently a different thing. And iTunes. You can just look up Good Morning, Good Night, or go to gmncast.com. We're going to be able to take your emails and questions and stuff either on our social media, on Twitch chat when we're doing this live, or gmncastmail@gmail.com. That's pretty much a good place to throw some questions. But I don't know. I think we're good for this week. How about you, Will?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay, so I guess from both Korea and Toronto, good morning, good night, all that other fun stuff. And we'll see you next week. One day we'll get through this without laughing, Will. One day we'll get through that outro without laughing. Okay, bye, guys.
Oh, man.